What's up, YouTube? This is your friend, the neighborhood movie nerd, back to give you guys everything that is going on in the world of movies and TV. And guys, you thought that we were done with Avatar content. Oh, no. Far from it. So with Avatar's sequel series, The Legend of Korra, officially dropping all of its episodes on Netflix today, I decided to once again complete our Avatar journey that we started way back when I put out my top 9 favorite Avatar characters. God, that feels like a million years ago. Oh, wait, it was only last month. So, without further ado, in order to wrap up that journey that started with that top 10 list and continue with our Avatar episode, today I am wrapping it up by doing my top 10 favorite Avatar episodes. Avatar has already proved to be an incredible show, breaking through a lot of storytelling and animation barriers, but specifically today I want to look at some of that. I want to break down some of my favorite episodes and look at what it is about each of them that makes the storytelling in this show so unique, how it reinforces the show's central themes, how it develops each of its characters in such a rich, interesting, and satisfying way, and how it ultimately folds into making Avatar the experience that it is. And so without further ado, here are my top 10 favorite Avatar: The Last Airbender episodes. The Siege of the North. Building off the momentum of the waterbending master, Aang and the gang, barely into Aang and Katara's waterbending training, are faced with newly promoted Admiral Zhao's impending invasion of the North Pole, a daring move for the Fire Nation. In order to combat this, Aang breaches into the spirit world in order to identify the moon and ocean spirits so that he can protect them before Zhao kills them, but too late discovers that they are back in the real world, manifesting as the 2 koi fish in the Northern Water Tribe's spirit oasis. Meanwhile, after having survived the assassination attempt in the previous episode, Zuko makes his way into the North Pole to capture Aang and even succeeds before getting stuck in a blizzard. Despite being comprised of mostly filler episodes, Season 1 to me is still an essential part of the viewing experience because it set up so many things that would come into play later on in the show's run. But this 2-part finale, besides being the biggest battle we'd seen on the show at this point, also cemented Avatar's themes and legacy of being about spiritual balance and finding one's own destiny. The visuals, character decisions, and action was some of the best the show had seen at this point, and it introduced several facets and images that would be remembered for the rest of the show. Ko the Face Stealer, anyone?
Something about stealing the face of someone you love.
It had some great twists, some even better action, and some heartbreak as well. It was a great season finale, but also just a taste of what would come later on. The Puppet Master. This was Avatar's dip into the horror genre, and boy did it deliver. Only a few days away from the eclipse and still exploring the Fire Nation, Team Avatar stumbles onto a seemingly haunted village in which several people disappear during the full moon. They are taken in by a strange old woman who's revealed to be a waterbender refugee from the Southern Water Tribe. She offers to teach Katara all that she knows about waterbending, which includes a very specific, very dangerous extension of the art: bloodbending, the manipulation of the actual water that makes up the human body, allowing one to manipulate people like marionette dolls. This episode gets props for introducing the horror element to Avatar, a genre that for the most part I can't stand. But besides the obvious creepy imagery and illusions, from a character standpoint, this also gets major props, because despite it being in the first half of Season 3, it still added extra context by showing the long-term effects the Fire Nation had on the rest of the world, and how far one could lose their way as a result. Because the thing that made Hama such a compelling character, albeit creepy, is that you completely understood her motivations, while at the same time seeing that she had become something far worse than ever intended. This was easily the most disturbing that Avatar had ever gotten, and it shows in the effects that it has on the characters, with Katara being forced to use bloodbending in order to stop Hama and save her friends. The Avatar and the Firelord. Another episode comprised entirely of flashbacks in the vein of The Storm, but this time it does something a little different. One of the many reasons why Avatar is so special is because even the filler episodes that are comprised of nothing but flashback adds more depth to the show, and this episode was no exception. Detailing the troubled history of Avatar Roku and Firelord Sozin from both Aang and Zuko's perspective, the audience is actually given a look into the conflict that led to the war that has rocked a majority of the show, revealing that the former Avatar and Firelord were actually best friends in their youth. That friendship is torn apart when Roku is revealed to be the next Avatar and has to depart for several years in order to explore the world and learn the other 3 elements. The thing that I love about this episode is that in addition to giving so much more context to the war and the Fire Nation, as well as who Sozin and Roku were as characters, it showed how circumstances out of one's control could lead to characters making decisions that would affect the rest of the world. Because extremely similar to The Storm, Roku becoming the next Avatar, a decision that was completely out of his control, would unintentionally lead to 100 years of misery and war for the world, with Sozin's insecurity and need to measure up to his childhood friend ultimately getting the better of him. It was also a great lesson about how the sins of the past don't necessarily have to define the future, not just for Aang, but for Zuko as well. Because just like in The Storm, the events of this episode define both characters, as Iroh reveals that Zuko was also descended from Roku through his mother, which also helps to outline the seemingly eternal conflict that Zuko has to go through. Some people might complain that this episode is primarily exposition and structure-wise is a little too similar to The Storm, and I can see where they're coming from. But for me, with how much extra context this episode added to the show, this is easily one of my favorite episodes. The Chase. Avatar was always known for its excellent action, but every once in a while they would have episodes that were just straight up non-stop action set pieces from beginning to end, and this was the episode that kicked that trend off. Newly joined by Toph, Team Avatar is just trying to find a place to sleep, but Azula and her new cronies, Mai and Ty Lee, are hot on their tails and will not give them a moment to rest. Just from an action standpoint, this episode delivered, as our main heroes are forced to go in the defense and give us some of the best bending moves and choreography on the show at this point. It even worked as a subversion of modern-day cartoon expectations, in which the good guys always get away or win. But here, every single chance they might have at getting away, getting some rest, or escaping, the bad guys are on them again. And it does a supremely good job of placing the viewers in the characters' shoes, to the point where you even begin to feel as tired as they are. It results in a Western-esque showdown, with even Zuko and Iroh joining in on the fight, resulting in some creative action set pieces and team-ups, as this was also the episode that gave us one of the show's best quiet moments, Toph and Iroh sitting down and having some tea, showing that even in the most heated of action, there's still some time for a nice cup of tea and a life lesson. Appa's Lost Days. Avatar is such a great show that even the animal sidekicks get their own episodes. This episode covers the span of time between the desert and Lake Laogai, showing what happened to Appa after he was kidnapped by the Sandbenders. Despite having really only served as the gang's mode of transportation and occasional Deus Ex Machina up to this point, this episode cemented that Appa was just as three-dimensional, just as interesting, and just as essential as any of the human characters. Appa's connection to Aang runs deep, as they are the last two remaining members of the Air Nomads and the Sky Bison, and the points in this episode where Appa is having flashbacks and thinking of Aang are when the emotions hit the hardest. From being sold to a circus, to being looked after by the Kyoshi warriors, to escaping from Azula and more, Appa has a lot to deal with, but his determination shows that his relationship with Aang is so much more than that of master and pet. This episode is so good that even Appa gets his own version of what Aang went through at the Southern Air Temple when he flies to the Eastern Air Temple where the Sky Bison were originally raised and remembers being there as a baby. Despite being about one of the animal sidekicks, this episode hits all the emotional beats and incredible storytelling that becomes staples of the show, while still adding something unique of its own. The Day of Black Sun. There's throwback episodes, there's flashback episodes, there's action episodes, there's nostalgia bait episodes, and then there's this. The midpoint of season 3, after 8 episodes of filler, albeit very good filler, finally sees the gang reuniting with other allies and friends they'd made over the course of the series in order to finally launch their attack on the Fire Nation on the day of the eclipse, also known as the Day of Black Sun, when every firebender's power is rendered mute. Every character you'd come to know and love, from the tiniest cameo to the biggest guest stars, makes an appearance here, and once the action gets going, it does not hold back. But even in the best Avatar episodes, you get some great character development and some even more brutal twists. The Fire Nation knows about the attack, with Azula having learned about it from the Earth King and Ba Sing Se in the previous season, and as a result, the gang and their allies quickly find themselves going from offensive to defensive. Even when Aang, Sokka, and Toph attempt to locate the Firelord in the secret tunnel system underneath the main palace, they are waylaid by Azula, who distracts them long enough for the eclipse to be over, forcing them to retreat. Despite the excellent setup and horrific heartbreak upon the gang's most recent loss, there is still a silver lining to this episode. Zuko, having finally had enough of the Fire Nation's evil, confronts his father, and one of the show's most satisfying moments tells him that he's going to join the Avatar and help him defeat him, even redirecting his own lightning back at him when he attempts to kill him yet again. It was a great midpoint for the season and only spelled out more awesome things to come. Zuko Alone. For a lot of people, this is one of their favorite episodes, and with good reason. From the outside looking in, it just looks like another filler episode, and on top of that, Aang and the gang aren't even in this. But everyone who's watched this episode knows its power, because if Zuko wasn't already a tragic enough figure based on his origin in the storm, then this solidified it. On his own, after departing from Iroh in order to clear his head, Zuko stumbles upon a smaller Earth Kingdom village that is being terrorized by bandits who claim to be protecting the village. Despite the more the generic plot setup for the episode, the real story is told in flashbacks Zuko has to his childhood with his mother, arguably the last time he was truly happy, and shows the strong effect that his mother Ursa had on him. As I said before, the thing about Zuko is that even though he's an antagonist for our characters for a majority of the show, he always felt like he had so much extra depth to him, more to like just another kid who was trying to find his way in the world. This episode showed his two conflicting sides and brought them to the surface, but the kicker is that the good people who he saved still ended up hating his guts simply for who he was, rather than the person he was trying to become. Even by Avatar's ridiculously high standard, this was a special episode, and really a different episode than most animated shows had done up to this point. The Guru, the Crossroads of Destiny. It's no secret that Avatar drew a lot of story beats from Star Wars, but with these 2 episodes marking the finale of Season 2, Avatar fans arguably got the best homage to The Empire Strikes Back that they could have possibly hoped for and more. Everything is going right and a little wrong for the gang. Having finally gained the Earth King's trust and having begun the plan to invade the Fire Nation on the day of the eclipse, Aang and Sokka depart Ba Sing Se, Sokka to reunite with his dad and the other water tribesmen from his village, while Aang heads to the Eastern Air Temple in order to learn how to unlock the Avatar state from a guru. Unfortunately, trouble is brewing, as Toph is captured by the men hired by her parents to find her, while Katara discovers that Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee have infiltrated Ba Sing Se by posing as the Kyoshi warriors, and it's too late to warn the Earth King and capture them in the process. I'm so beyond happy that Netflix merged these 2 episodes into one, because as if all that isn't enough, there's even more that happens. Toph teaches herself how to metal bend in order to escape from her captors, while Aang sees that Katara is in danger and leaves before his training is finished. And upon arriving back in Ba Sing Se, they discover that Azula has already enacted her plan to take over the Earth Kingdom, with the help of the treacherous Long Fang and the Dai Li agents. And as if that wasn't enough, Zuko and Iroh have also gotten themselves into the mix, with Zuko being forced to make the most difficult decision he's had to make yet. And Yeah. In a move that broke all of our hearts and seemed to undo all the amazing character development he'd gone through up to this point, Zuko helps Azula fight Aang and Katara, betraying the gang and even worse, his uncle's faith in him. His uncle who'd stood behind him through thick and thin. And just when Aang finally chooses to let go of all attachment and enter the Avatar state, bam! Azula hits him with lightning and almost kills him. In fact, if not for Iroh's involvement and Katara's magic water from the Spirit Oasis, there would be no more Avatar. It was the darkest the show had gotten yet. It was a hell of a season capper, particularly since it capped arguably Avatar's best season, and it proved to be one of the best episodes of the series. The Storm, the episode that finally told us what kind of a show Avatar was. As I've said previously, Avatar is a show that knew how to take every single type of story cliche and flip it on its head. And this was the first time that we got a full-on flashback episode, and yet it was so much more. Stopping off in a fishing village, Aang, Katara, and Sokka volunteer to help a fisherman, despite warnings of a massive approaching storm. And when the fisherman accuses Aang of not being there when the world needed him, Aang runs off. Followed by Katara, the two settle in a cave where Aang tells Katara the story of what led to him ending up in the iceberg. And on top of that, the B story sees Zuko dealing with a potential mutiny from his fellow sailors, at least until Iroh sits them down and tells them the reason behind Zuko's scar and why he is so hell-bent on finding the Avatar. In the first of a couple episodes that would show that Aang and Zuko were connected in more ways than one, these two flashbacks show how each of these characters' actions ultimately led to the decisions that would send them on their respective destinies, as well as how the world was affected by it. This episode holds its spot here because this was the point where Avatar stopped being another kid show and became something more. Even when I watched this episode as a kid, I was completely wowed by how mature the storytelling here was, how brutally honest it got, and even years later, I'm still amazed by how in-depth this episode goes. Because by two simple decisions happening, Aang being too scared and not ready to face becoming the Avatar, and Zuko simply wanted to do what was best for his nation and speaking out of turn, the air temples were completely sacked, the air nomads wiped out, while Zuko was banished, his honor stripped of him, and any chance of morality gone, at least at the time. And for an animated kid show to make storytelling choices and decisions that were arguably on par with something like Game of Thrones, with this rich, fleshed out world that could be affected by the smallest of character decisions, that was a game changer to say the least. It was the moment when Avatar officially became Avatar, and if not for my number one choice, would be my favorite episode. Before we get to the number one choice, here are some honorable mentions. Sozin's Comet, the 4-part series finale that accomplished so many things, but above all else, actually hit the impossible task of being the best TV series finale ever. Kidding, it's still Breaking Bad. Or am I? No, you want to talk about placing the characters in the highest stakes they've faced yet? Check. Give our hero an almost impossible task to overcome that goes against everything he believes in as a human being? Check. Fulfill each and every single character's arc to the point where there is no stone left unturned? Check, check, and more checks. As a society, we've become so accustomed to TV finales being disappointed that it's almost become a meme. We form this unhealthy attachment so that when it ends, usually on a disappointing note, we riot. But Avatar didn't fall victim to that. In the finale, which really works as both one big episode to cap off the series, as well as a great movie, Team Avatar is faced with the fact that the Firelord is going to enact his final endgame plan of burning the Earth Kingdom to the ground when Sozin's Comet arrives. Sozin's Comet had been hinted at since the 7th episode of the first season, a comet that amplifies a firebender's ability by 100. The last time the comet came was when Sozin began the 100-Year War, and it leaves our gang in a very big predicament, especially when Aang disappears. But with the help of the Order of the White Lotus, the gang departs on their own side quest in order to do their part in ending the war and stopping Zuko's insane father from destroying it once and for all. This episode/movie is awesome. There's simply no other way to describe it. The action is great, the animation has never been better, the character motivations and fulfillments are at its peak, and the emotions have never been higher. It's almost unfair to really compare this to any other episode, and the crazy part is, you don't even actually get a sense that the good guys are going to win. But at the end of the day, the finale did what every other finale is supposed to do, by reinforcing the central theme of the show: balance. Good cannot exist without evil, and the same exists vice versa. This is perfectly represented by Aang's decision not to kill the Firelord, but rather find a different way to end the war by taking away his bending, something really nobody else had thought of. The other thing that the internet has molded its audience to think is that because something gets a happy ending, it's not a fitting ending, which could not be further from the truth, because every character here gets the happy ending that they deserve, or rather really, the ending that they deserve. It culminated in Avatar becoming elevated to something much more than just another show, rather more like a viewing experience. Everything was perfectly executed on its delivery and sent the show off in the best of fashions, making this the best episode of Avatar. And that was it. Those were my top 10 favorite episodes of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments section below. What are your guys' favorite Avatar episodes? Make sure you also click the like button, click that subscribe button, also click the little bell next to it. That way you get notified every time we put up a new video. Make sure you guys stay tuned because we've got a lot more content coming out always. And of course, as always, people, watch more fucking movies.